Welcome to another morning episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. For tuning in live, then I especially thank you for giving me your time so early. And it is so early. Almost 20 new laws went into effect this month. This morning, I review one of them, HB 919, what is called the Homeowners Association Bill of Rights. I also discuss the history that led up to this bill and some ways that you can protect yourself from bad HOAs. Because, I mean, does anybody really like HOAs? No. All right. Let's get all my stuff going here this morning. So let's start off with the obvious. Hopefully, anybody that was listening in to or tuning in yesterday, they can hear that my voice sounds a little bit better. I'm feeling a little bit better today. Also, the audio should be better as well. I had an incorrect setting, and so it sounded when I went back and I listened to it, I was like, "Goodness, what is this audio going on here?" It apparently sounded like I was in a box or something, and so you add that I wasn't feeling so well and my voice was all jacked up already. Then I sound like I'm in a box. Like, goodness, what kind of I need a new producer. That guy that's doing it right now, he ain't cutting it. So, at any rate, we're going to be talking about this homeowner association Bill of Rights, because everybody loves the Bill of Rights, right? Well, we'll see. But let's start with what got me. So a friend actually sent me a link and he was like, "Hey, you guys got a homeowner association, right? Like there's a new law that's in place." And I said, "Well, not actually." I said, we have a civic association. It's a very different thing. Um, and the cool part is it's voluntary. Like when I tell people, they're like, "What do you mean voluntary?" I'm like, meaning I can choose to be in the civic association or not. I can choose to pay the dues or not. And a lot of people ask me, they're like, "Well, why would you want to? Why would you willfully do this?" And the reason I actually, we are a part of the association. And the reason is so that I can contribute my voice when I feel like they're doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing. And so that I have a vote. So that's I'm basically paying to participate. Now it turns out that in our case, they don't actually have a lot of authority. I don't think they have any authority actually over our property. My property does back up to the lake, and they do maintain the lake. And technically, you're not supposed to be in the lake or at the docks unless you are a member of the association. But that's not really, that's another reason I kind of like feel like if I'm going to be on the lake, maybe I should probably help pay for the lake because it's contributing to my property. So, but that's just, but here's the clip. Let's pull that clip up of what stirred me to do this episode this morning. And so this comes out of CBS News, Miami. Here we go.
This month, 18 new laws went into effect in Florida. One of them was HB 919, also known as the Florida Homeowners Association Bill of Rights.
But what is now in effect as law is a pared-down version of the original bill. CBS News Miami's Yvonne Taylor joins us from Kendall with what you need to know about the changes.
HB 919 was a 60-page bill when it got to Tallahassee, but what was approved as a law at the state legislature was reduced to 17 pages.
One of the most ambitious projects in regards to attaining more accountability and transparency.
State Legislator Juan Carlos Porras was the sponsor of HB 919. Hammocks community, which was in the news because of allegations of corruptions, emerged as a ray of light for HOA and condo associations.
The intent of the bill is still there.
Well, it was not approved and we expected.
Anna Danton lives in the Hammocks. She paid elevated maintenance fees and was instrumental in the arrest of 5 people at her HOA.
These corrupt boards have a support system between the vendors that assist them to stay in power.
So what's the ideal scenario?
To make them responsible for their participation, not having to go to a lawsuit.
We asked state representative if any violators of the law would face felony charges.
At the moment, there's nothing higher than a misdemeanor. I know in the original bill, we did have some felony charges.
Who got involved in there to change this?
Right. I mean, obviously, we had a lot of differences, especially in the Senate. I think there's a lack of an understanding, of the topic of HOAs and condo fraud.
Transparency and conflict of interest. HOA officers and directors are now mandated to disclose any activity that could be perceived as conflict of interest.
That also stayed.
So what did not stay?
The main aspect I think that did not stay, like we mentioned, was this statewide task force as a sort of hotline for residents to be able to call and investigate some of these HOAs and condos.
In Kendall, Ivan Taylor, CBS News, Miami.
All right. So that's a little bit of a summary of this bill. We're going to go through it here in just a minute, and I will try not to make it too terribly boring, okay? Because I mean, like, who really likes to read laws, and who likes to discuss laws at 7 a.m. in the morning? Like, what kind of lunatic am I? I don't even know. Okay, so check it out. I printed it out as well. I actually got 16 pages. I think he said 17, didn't he? But 17, 16 pages down from 60, I think that's a good thing. You know, like 60 pages is a lot. Imagine if you're a legislator and they passed 18 new laws, and imagine if every one of them was 60 pages long. That's a lot of reading. And no wonder that our lawmakers are not reading the bills, because they don't a lot of times. A lot of times they don't. They may have, some assistants read the bills and give them a summary or something like that. So they don't necessarily they're not necessarily reading these bills to say, you know what, this is actually a good thing, and this is something that's going to be very helpful um, to my constituency. Now, it seems like maybe in this particular case, some of it was read, because if you went from 60 to 17, I mean, somebody had to read it in order to get it down. So kudos on that. On my, I'm making an assumption here, but kudos on taking a bill from 60 pages down to 17. Yeah, I can't complain about that. Now, I will say this: 17 pages. When I'm looking at this, in 16 pages here, I will point out, and we'll see it here in a little bit, that a lot of it is not actually changes. So the way that they write a bill, when you go and you pull up a bill that's, slated to be voted on, you'll notice that maybe in this case, it's 16 pages, but a lot of it is just existing statute, because what they do is they will strike out words where they're going to delete things, and then they will have underline for things that are going to be added. And so, to put it into context of the rest of the statute, they will add a good portion of the statute. So if you only if you only collected what was new or deleted from a bill, even a 17-page bill, 16, 17-page bill might only be 2 or 3 pages of actual changes. So a lot of it is existing statute that you just got to read so that you understand the context of what these changes are. So they mentioned in that clip task force. I swear, we love task force, don't we? Like I hear that a lot. After the shooting here in Jacksonville, there was that white supremacist who went from Clay County, came over to Duval County here in Duval, and he went to a Dollar General, and he shot and killed 3 black people, and this was very racially motivated. He left behind some document, and he apparently, what is not in question this time is that he was actually in some way a white supremacist, or he had racist views or something. I don't think they ever released his memo or something like that, but we did get some quotations from it, some citations from it. So they started to talk about having a task force after that too. So it seems like task force are super popular, as is, calling everything a Bill of Rights. But often, in my opinion, that is just simply not necessary. Talking about the HOAs, the biggest and again, this is observation. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not somebody who studies HOAs per se, but I just talk to a lot of friends, and I observe what's going on in the media, and I just, read things from here to here. It seems to me that the biggest problem with HOAs, aside from their absurd tyranny, is that people are not educated on their governance. Sound familiar? Bill of Rights will do you no good if you don't know what your rights are in the first place, if you don't know how to exercise them, if you're unfamiliar with the recourse for violations, and if you don't know how to change undesired governance. Like, they should have a path for that. And if you don't know those things, then a Bill of Rights is not really all that useful to you. I mean, it is to a degree because you could enshrine certain things and then you can have expectations, but you don't really know what they are. You don't know how to change them. If you decide that, hey, you know what? We need to add to it, or it turns out this one wasn't really such a good idea. Maybe we should remove it for whatever reason. So if you don't know those things, then you can't change them and improve them and make them better. Governing rules for these kind of organizations are often a combination of state statute, Robert's Rules of Order, and bylaws. Now, in my opinion, I might get some people angry here. Most important is the exact reverse: bylaws, Robert's Rules of Order, state statute. The reason I say that is because in the organizations that I've been in, and I've been in a number of organizations, I have served on the board of a technology organization, a hackerspace up in Charlotte. I was actually a founding member of that. I was also on the board as the secretary um, for a real estate nonprofit here in Jacksonville. I am now the officer, or the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Duval County. I served on the rules committee for the state Libertarian Party here in Florida. So I've got a little bit of experience, and it seems to me that what ends up happening is people people look to what the bylaws say first. Now, in the libertarian community, they tend to look at a lot of it. So it's a little different when you get to the political parties, it may be a little different, but in your day-to-day organizations like civic associations or homeowners associations and stuff like that, it seems to me that when I've talked to friends, when I've just observed things, from around wherever, that it's the bylaws that tend to be the first thing that people go to. Sometimes they go to Robert's Rules of Order, which is like this big, thick, like 700, 800, 900 page book, full of just rules. Most of it you probably would never need to worry about. But sometimes they do refer to that. And then occasionally state statute. That doesn't mean that the other two are less or important. I'm just saying in terms of what's more important for you to know in your HOA or in your civic association. Sometimes I think churches will have these. There's a lot of organizations, a lot of nonprofit organizations will use these as well. Is your bylaws? That's like your first and foremost go to, because the way that it works is you have any state statute that kind of like reigns supreme, and it doesn't always cover a lot. And then after that, it'll be your parliamentary rules, which tend to be, but not always, Robert's Rules of Order. So you'll have Robert's Rules of Order, which will kind of govern everything. And then after that, it's the bylaws, right? So like whatever Robert's Rules of Order either doesn't say, or somebody wants to override, that will be in your bylaws. State statute, you don't get to override anything. So that's just it. That is the way it is. So state statute is kind of like firm. Then you got Robert's Rules of Order, which is probably firm unless it is changed in the bylaws, and where neither the state statute nor Robert's Rules of Order mention something, then that would be a place potentially for the bylaws to talk about. So that's my perception of the governing rules in these kind of organizations. Now, it was interesting when I was watching that video and they mentioned the hammocks, being the reason why HB 919 kind of came into existence. I was curious and I started looking and I was like, holy wow. Like, first of all, they had 5 people arrested. And the hammock story is wild. So what I want to do is I want to play a couple clips, and we'll talk about them. But this is just, it's intense. Like I was just really blown away. You always hear these terrible HOA stories, and usually it's like I'll tell you a story that my friend, he lives in an HOA and community, and he has, like, if you've ever seen the bricks that you like put around, like, say, a tree or just like a plant or something to make it look nice, and then so you just kind of line it around, and the diameter might be just like a couple of feet or something like that. We had a plant in there, like I don't remember, I can't remember what kind of plant, but he had a plant, and the plant died, and he didn't do anything with it. He just took the plant out, and so all you had was the bricks, and then I think he had some sort of filling in there, like wood chips or something like that. Maybe some rocks or some stone or something. But so it looked nice, right? But the HOA came over and they gave him a nasty letter, and they said, if you have one of those lined, areas in your grass like that, it actually has to have a plant. Like you can't just take nice bricks and make a circle and put wood chips in it or stones. Like it has to have a plant. And so he got dinged for it. So he had to put a plant in there. I told him I would have put a dandelion, which is probably why wife does not have me in an HOA. A little too feisty for that. So anyway, let's play this clip of the hammocks and let's see what's going on. What kind of started this? Now these clips are a couple of years old, so some of them are like a year, or, a couple of years old. Some of them are even a little bit longer than that. So just check it out. It's funny. So here we go. Clip 1 and
tonight, chaos during a large protest against a South Florida homeowners association.
Residents in the hammocks fed up with what they describe as years of corruption.
years.
Let's get right to Local 10's Terrell Fournay with the details for us. Terrell.
And there was a lot of yelling and a lot of back and forth between homeowners of the hammocks and the people here at the association offices, and a process to collect and gather ballots actually turned into quite a protest. What was supposed to be a simple process to pick new leadership of the Hammocks Community Association was anything but.
They claim they received a call with some kind of threat.
Hundreds of homeowners who waited in line Monday night were suddenly turned away.
We want a fair chance. Our money's being stolen from us. This administration had $3 million in surplus when they were put in office, and they took out a $1.5 million loan. And it's just, our association fees are paying for her criminal attorney.
It was just last year when the association's former president and treasurer was arrested and accused of stealing more than $100,000 from her neighbors. Prosecutors say Margeli Gallego misused the association's credit card to rack up tens of thousands of dollars for restaurants and shops and other online purchases. About $50,000, they say, was used to pay a private investigator for work that included watching her own home. Tonight, homeowners were given a ballot and the first shot in a few years to vote in a new board of directors under social distancing rules.
Honest elections, stop corruption.
But the process stopped in its tracks, which only fueled skepticism.
I don't understand how this is fair on any level.
And so those social distancing rules meant that only one or two people could go inside of the building at a time to cast their ballot before that process was stopped. What remains to be seen at this point is how this process will actually be resolved and who the new leadership will be of the Hammocks Association. It's certainly safe to say we have not heard the last of this one. Reporting live from Southwest Miami-Dade tonight, I'm Terrell Fournay, Local 10 News.
Oh wow, that was like they were protesting. There was look like hundreds of them out there protesting their HOA. That's crazy. And the HOA got $3 million to when that particular administration was in, and then all of a sudden they need to take out a $1.5 million loan, and people, like this is crazy. And I'm going to be sending this episode to my buddy now. One of my buddies, he doesn't necessarily watch my show, and he's not a libertarian, but he is dealing with something that's hopefully much, much, much smaller in scale. But they had a situation where apparently they couldn't meet quorum. And so they have their annual elections and they could not meet quorum. So therefore they just basically canceled the meeting because they can't have a meeting. You can't have a meeting if you don't have quorum. And then after that, so people weren't able to vote for who they wanted. And then I think just recently there was another issue that came up where they were going to vote, but then I don't remember now. And for some reason, I just don't remember. But for whatever reason, they're having an issue still with trying to get their vote in. So it's crazy. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to send this video to him and be like, dude, I hope you guys aren't turning into the hammocks over there. Like, I don't know. 5 people arrested. That was pretty wild. Now, I think what happened, I didn't really investigate too far. I think what ended up happening is the people said, look, we want an election, election time came up and they're like, we're going to kick you guys out. And then they were under social distancing rules. And so only like 1 or 2 people could go in even at a time. And then all of a sudden there was some sort of threat. And so then they were like, all right, we're going to stop. We can't, we can't conduct this because there's a threat, and it's a big deal. And so now you have like this group of people protesting their own homeowner association. There's the police on scene, news media on scene. Like that's wild. That's just crazy. So what ended up happening? Well, let's take a look at that last video, and then we'll move on and we'll start talking about this HB 919. So let's see what we got here. Where are you? There you are. Okay, awesome. And
In a troubled South Florida Homeowners Association.
A judge has appointed a receiver to handle the business of the Hammocks HOA just days after several board members were arrested in a massive fraud scheme. Local 10's Cody Weddle live now in Southwest Miami-Dade with the details tonight. Cody.
Calvin and Nicole, people who live here are describing a homeowners association that slowly morphed into an organized criminal structure. And tonight they're celebrating the end of what many called a reign of terror. With bottles of champagne, an overjoyed crowd in the hammocks celebrating victory in a 7-year fight with their homeowners
7
association.
years.
We will mark November 17th, 2022 as the Hammocks Day of Independence.
The crowd gathering in front of the community clubhouse, a building they say felt off limits to them for years.
It's joyous. This is almost like a national holiday if you could have one in the hammocks.
You guys are brave. It's all over.
Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Beatrice Buchko ordering the HOA be handed over to a receiver along with a temporary board of advisors from the community. 5 people associated with the board now face racketeering and other charges. They allegedly ran the organization like a mafia, siphoning money to their own shell companies, threatening and harassing those who spoke up.
The fear that they instill in us is, you know what? You don't pay, we're going to take your home.
We needed this to happen, and we've been fighting so strong for so long just to get our community back. Today is like is a dream come true.
Many now calling for more oversight from Tallahassee.
I think we've seen rampant abuse in HOAs across the state of Florida. I think it's time that we hold them accountable.
And so that HOA collected around $4 million per year in dues. The big question here will be how much of that remains. The good news, though, for people here is that judge ruled that the monthly dues must be returned to last year's numbers. That former board had increased those by nearly 400%. Reporting from Southwest Miami-Dade, I'm Cody Weddle, Local 10 News.
What? All right. That's crazy. That is just like they arrested 5 people. I don't know how many people were on the board in total, but they arrested 5 of them. They had a 7-year fight, and the people literally celebrated like it was Independence Day with champagne and singing. Like that's wild. No HOA should ever have that kind of power over people. Threatening to, from my investigation, kind of just, reviewing information, it seemed like what they were doing is if people tried to speak out and say, hey, something's not right, they would get threatened, like, hey, well, looks like you've got something going on over here. You better fix it or we're going to put a lien on your home. We're going to take it. So it was just the most amazing story that I've heard of from an HOA. It was just absolutely intense. But this is what leads to, or what has led to the bill that passed, HB 919. And so we're going to do a bill review. Yes, a bill review at 7:30 in the morning.
But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, so we're still just a bill. My little guy there, he was very participative. He participated very well for me in that video. It's an old one. Maybe I'll update it with a newer one since he's much older now. But so HB 919. Let's pull that up on the screen. Let's see. I think that's good enough to read. That's big enough. So bill reviews are, I try to make them not boring. So folks, let me know. Let me know if it's boring or not. I'm going to try to do my best. We're not going to go through all 17 pages. I'm sorry, all 16 pages. I'm just going to go over what I think is the most relevant parts here. So I've highlighted this top portion here. I'm not really going to read the whole thing, but I think a lot of times the very beginning of a bill, it starts like this, is like, an act relating to blah 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 blah, and then it goes through and it kind of tells you what it's going to do. So it's almost like a little summary, right, of what is the bill. And we'll just read a couple of lines of this, because it is a long bit here. But I think if you want to find out more about it, you have an HOA and you want to know what your HOA Bill of Rights includes now, then I think it's worthwhile to print this out or just go read it from the internet. 16 pages, you can totally do that. So it says an act relating to homeowners associations, providing a short title, amending the statute, requiring that notices for board meetings specifically identify agenda items, requiring an association to maintain designated addresses as official records, specifying what constitutes a designated address, conforming provisions to changes made by the act. I don't really know what that means. Prohibiting certain funds from being commingled with other association funds, so on and so forth. So that's basically what we've got going on. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of walk through a few things here, and we're just going to kind of identify why I think that, number one, let me tell you what I think is missing first and foremost, is any explicit mention to provide recourse to remove an officer acting in bad faith. Now, maybe it's already in the statute, but I didn't see it when I was reading through this. So maybe it's in another statute somewhere else. So let's take a look at that part. That part is on page 3. So we'll scroll down here. We can see that there's a whole bunch of text here. So it continues on this very intro here. I just highlighted some of it. And then section 1, this act may be cited as the homeowner association's Bill of Rights. So, we're declaring what this bill is. We go through and we can see that this is where they start adding things, right? Where we see things that are underlined. So we'll continue on. Oh, wait a minute. It was page 3 that I wanted to look at. So, so this portion here, 2C, board meetings. Now it says the bylaws, and I didn't actually highlight this. Maybe I should have. That's okay. So bylaws shall provide the following for giving notice to parcel owners and members of all board meetings, and if they do not do so, shall be deemed to include the following. So basically, what it's saying is the bylaws must include anything that's in here, right, in this bill. So when you read this, and you're looking through it, it's first telling you that either the bylaws have to include this information or it's assumed that they do, right? So it's basically like, even if it's not written in there, it's basically assumed, like, we're state statute. We are dictating what must be in there. If it's not, well, then you can read the state statute for what it should have been there. And so number one that they've added here is they're talking about the notices for the board meetings must specifically identify agenda items for the meetings. This is actually really, really common, that an organization will need to publish or should publish the agenda items. So if you're reading if you're like, hey, I want to attend, like our city council here in Jacksonville, they put out an agenda before the meeting. Now, sometimes they put it out like, I don't know, the day before or something like that. And it's really long. So you don't always have a chance to read everything and, thoroughly consume it. That's its own issue. But what they're saying here is that you have to have you have to have the agenda items stated you have to, goodness, a little tongue tied there. You have to specifically put out the agenda for the meeting so that people can read it. So then we're going to skip on to page 7. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. We just want to go through it kind of quickly and see. And let's see, I think I highlighted them on my page here, and I forgot to highlight them in the PDF document. So I do apologize for that, folks. I'm going to have to get more on the ball about this. So let's see, go down here, and here it is. So I'm going to highlight it on the screen for you right there. So it's adding in under officers and directors, and it's saying an officer, a director, or a manager who knowingly solicits, offers to accept, or accepts anything or service of value or kickback for which consideration has not been provided for his or her own benefit or that of his or her immediate family from any person providing or proposing to propose goods or services to the association is subject to monetary damages. So basically, they are saying that that if you are accepting anything in value, basically, if you're taking bribes, let's put it that way, or if you're accepting something that is, you know what, I forgot to give a quick disclaimer. I am not a lawyer, by the way, folks, so I'm just reading this on my own goodwill. But it's basically just saying that, hey, like, look, there are issues if you're accepting things, because what happened in the hammocks, apparently, and I've heard of this in other associations as well, is that they uh, somebody will basically give you a kickback. They'll say, hey, if you hire my company, I'll do your yard. If you hire my company to do the lawn for your organization, I'll cut you a break on your yard, something like that, right? So they're getting benefits, and they're saying, hey, this is unacceptable. So then we move on to the next page here, and I wish I'd highlighted everything, but I did not. So let me turn this. Okay, so here's the good one. So forgery of ballot envelope or voting certificate used in a homeowners association election, theft or embezzlement involving the association funds, destruction of or the refusal to allow inspection or copying of official records of homeowners association. So basically, they're saying, like, hey, any director or officer charged by information or indictment with any of the following crimes must be removed. So they do offer what will constitute removal if you violated it. But think about this, folks. Once somebody's violated, the action has already happened. If they've embezzled money, the money's already been taken from you, right? If they have forged ballot, if they've forged a ballot, if they've falsified ballots for the voting, they have stolen your vote, right? These are things that, number one, have already happened, and then number two, they've goodness, lost my train of thought. Stuff doing a broadcast live at 7 in the morning. You guys should change that. Anyway, but these things have already happened to you, and they have to be caught. They have to be they have to. It's as if they're charged by information or indictment. In other words, if they're not caught doing it, it could still happen. So the only recourse is if they get caught, not necessarily if it happens. Okay, folks, I want to point that out. And then the biggest addition goes to page 14. So we'll skip over there really quickly. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's just a whole lot. Fraudulent voting activities relating to association elections penalties. So if they willfully and falsely swear to or affirm an oath or an affirmation I'm not going to read all this. This is boring. This is like 7:30 in the morning. Who does this? You know what? I'm not going to do this. Basically, these most of this deals with fraud, voting, and communication of meetings. But the problem is, let's pull me back up on the screen here so that we're not reading a whole bunch of text at 7:30 in the morning. Like, this is crazy. I should have known better. All right. So basically what's going on is this bill deals with fraud, voting, and communication of meetings primarily. There's a few other things in there. So if you read the bill, you'll find out that they make specifications based on your email address and your, what address that you want to be communicated with. Okay. And so it's really just those three things primarily, fraud, voting, communication. And the problem that I have with this is, again, it doesn't really give any of the homeowners any recourse to prevent these things. These are all things that happen after the fact. Like, hey, if you've been caught doing these things, well, then yes, now it's a civil penalty up to a misdemeanor. So apparently they used to have a task force that would investigate. And the problem that I have with the task force is it still delegates your responsibility. It's your homeowners association, and any association should always benefit. Number one priority is to benefit the members. Members' rights reign supreme. If you are a member of the Libertarian Party, and you'll see that we'll argue a lot of times about the bylaws and about this action and that action, it's because we are concerned with each individual member's rights. the rights reign supreme of whatever organization you're in. So if you're in a homeowners association, if you are a homeowner, then your rights as a homeowner reign supreme. If you're in a political party, your rights as a voting member reign supreme. If you are in a nonprofit, say a real estate group, and you are a paying member, your rights reign supreme. And all the governing documents should be centered around that. This is why I said earlier that when you get into an organization, be it, like the homeowners association, you should absolutely read the bylaws. You should know what you're getting into so that is this an organization? Is it set up in a way that benefits me as a homeowner? And I think what a lot of people end up doing is that they look and they say, okay, well, we've got an HOA and they're basically there to increase the property values. Now we can have an argument of, at some other day about whether or not they actually do that, whether or not it's artificial, all that good stuff. But the reality is that is not necessarily what you should be looking at. You should be looking at, how does this affect me in my day-to-day activities? Like my friend I was talking about earlier, he put out a dishwasher one time, and I think he put it out like a couple of days early or something like that for the city to come pick up. And the homeowners association called him up and they said, "Hey, you've got this dishwasher out. You've got to remove it. It's not trash day." He said, "Yeah, but it's in like 2 days." And they were like, "Too bad." Right. So like you had to pull it in. Like this kind of stuff is ridiculous. This you should not have to live like that. And nor does that actually contribute, in my opinion, to the to your home, to the property value of your the home that you live in. It just does. Like nobody is driving into a neighborhood and saying, "Oh, they've got a dishwasher out early for the city to come pick up. I guess this is a trash neighborhood." Like nobody says that. And if they do, then you don't want them in your neighborhood anyway, because they're just going to be a pain. All right, so let's talk about, how do you protect yourself? Because the problem that I have with this, let me take a drink of water here real quick, folks. The problem that I have with this bill is that it's very reactive. It's after the fact. If you get caught, then there are penalties, but it doesn't give people an opportunity to really dig in and remove an officer who's just maybe being a bad officer. This kind of deals with what the hammocks community went through. It doesn't necessarily deal with other communities and what they're going through, and they may be going through something different, right? Like my friend who's, I asked him. I said, "Can't you guys make a motion to, that puts on the floor?" And he asked some people that are running for the board who are a little bit more familiar with the bylaws, and he said, "Nope, the bylaws do not permit regular members to make a motion." Right now, I think that's kind of common, but I would say that if you cannot make a motion and I think in this case it was to have their elections anyway, because the issue was something about somebody was on the ballot, and if they found out later after the ballots were already printed that this person was ineligible, and so then they were like, "Well, how do we handle this? I guess we're just going to have to delay it yet again." And so I was like, "Well, can't you just, you know, vote, like suspend the rules, is, to say, hey, we're going to have the election anyway. And we're going to communicate to all the members that this person is ineligible. Any vote for this particular person will not be counted." And they were told, like, "No, we can't make that motion. We're going to have to wait on the homeowners association, the directors or whatever." So I think this is nonsense. I think you should be able to have this kind of power. And if you don't, then you should reconsider whether or not you really want to be in that homeowner. And I get it. There's nice homes in some of these areas with HOAs. But the reality is, when people start participating, when they start understanding and recognizing the bylaws, that's when changes happen. So, how do you protect yourself? Well, number one, don't buy homes where there's an HOA. That's probably the easiest way. That's what we did. We have a civic association. It's much different. You can look into it and see what the difference is. But that's actually tough because there's a lot of nice homes and they happen to be in areas with an HOA. The second option is to review the bylaws. before you buy in any single neighborhood. I did. I looked at our bylaws and I was like, I know that we have a voluntary civic association. So, wow, what does that mean for me? So I looked into it, and it turned out they didn't really have a lot of teeth, So I was like, all right, great. Because the last thing that I think that people should do is buy a several $100,000 home and then pay a whole bunch of money to somebody, or even more, and pay a whole bunch of money so that somebody else can dictate what they can do with the several $100,000 home that they are paying for. That's a crazy idea to me. So then you can refuse to buy a home anywhere the bylaws don't clearly allow homeowners to have some level of some full authority in some way, right? In other words, there should be a way for homeowners to deal with this internally and not have to get the state involved. And if the bylaws don't offer that, then refuse to buy a home there and let them know and say, hey, I'm not buying this home because your bylaws are junk. They do not allow the homeowners to reign supreme. And is there a process for homeowners to toss bad officers out? Or do they have to wait to an election that could be delayed again and again? Can homeowners make motions or at least submit them? Is there some sort of process for homeowners to be involved and say, hey, you know what? I think you need to be talking about this. I think this needs to be up for a vote. There's no process. Then why would you want to be in because you are basically allowing yourself to be under tyranny like the hammocks community did. Now, probably not a lot of homeowners associations will allow for this, but that's okay for now, because the idea here is that once you start paying attention, once you stop relying on Bill of Rights, which are incomplete, once you stop relying on potential task force, once you start relying on your own authority and start asking for it, then things will change. That's how you make changes. In my opinion, the best way, I love the civic association that we have now. And we get a little bit of potential tyranny, but it gets shot down pretty quickly. And I'm not going to get into the stories on that. The third option, like, okay, let's say you're living in a homeowners association right now. Like, it's too late. You can't decide. I guess you could sell, but that's its own cumbersome process. But the third option would be to attend the meetings and get voted on the board. Participate as much as you can. Get your neighbors to rally around you, get on the board, then you become a vote. And if the members cannot submit motions, then you do it. You attend the meeting, get voted on the board, and then you can submit motions on behalf to change the bylaws. Bylaws should be able to be changed, and if you cannot change them, well, that's just crazy. Like, I definitely run. But those are your options, right? First option, again, let's review them really quickly. Then we're going to close. Best option: don't buy a home in an HOA, and let them know. I don't like HOAs because you guys are too restrictive. But that's tough. So the second option: review the bylaws before buying in a neighborhood. And if you don't like how the bylaws treat the homeowners, then say, hey, you know what? I was just about ready to put an offer on this home, but I'm not going to because the bylaws, they're insufficient to protect me as a homeowner. And then the third option, if you just say, hey, I've got to have this house, or you already live in a neighborhood with an HOA, attend the meetings, get voted on the board, right? I get it. People don't want to be on the board. It is a headache. You have to learn all this stuff. We're busy. We've got things going on. But here, let me put it to you this way. Think of it this way. You buy a $250,000 home. Maybe it's more, right? But let's just say it's $250,000. You pay $250,000 for a home. Part of that investment on your part is maintenancing, right? Like, keep up the yard, you make sure the house stays, clean, you repair things. Well, part of that investment also includes the board that governs it. And if you're not participating in that, then you're really not managing that $250,000 investment. And you should. You should absolutely be on the board. So those are my solutions. I hope that you enjoyed the episode today, folks. I know it was a little bit dry. I got to work on it. I'm gonna figure it out. Like, I'm gonna keep going. We're gonna review bills, and I'm gonna figure out how to review bills so they're not so bloody boring in the morning. Okay, But for now, this is what we've got to work with. Leave me comments. Let me know. Say, DL, here's one way that you could do this. Maybe I'm open to suggestions. But for now, look at that. Got something a little new here. Trying things out. We're just kind of, Liberty Dad is all about making improvements, moving forward. Catch me on youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com, especially Rumble. Now, there's not videos up on there yet. I'm not streaming there yet. I'm still working on figuring out everything with the service that I use. But for right now, I could totally use people going to my Rumble channel and following. And eventually, probably within the next week here, you're going to start seeing some things happening. I'm collecting all my videos. I'm going to start. I'm probably going to only update on Rumble some of the more recent ones since I kicked off doing the morning show. I'll probably only update those there. I'm not going to update anything from beyond that because it's just way too long ago. So I want to thank you for tuning in. Especially again, if you did it so early, but if you're watching later, hey, that's great too. Remember, check me out every Monday through every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth. We will discuss LP happenings. That is what is going on in the libertarian community, specifically with affiliates, local and state level across the United States. Do all the proper things, please. Subscribe to my channel, like videos, leave me comments. Sometimes I get good comments and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. So, your participation with this show helps me make it a better show. If you want to follow me on social media, Liberty Dad on Facebook, Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter. You can also send me an email, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, folks, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great week. Catch you next time and out.